What if the innocent kitten you found in your barn wasn't a kitten at all, but a wild panther in disguise? Imagine raising it for years, only to discover that your pet now weighs 100 pounds, and everything you thought you knew was about to be turned upside down. This is the incredible, jaw-dropping true story of Midnight, the panther who defied all expectations. Imagine finding a tiny, helpless kitten abandoned in your barn. It's a moment that changes everything. But what if, 3 years later, that same kitten grows to over 100 pounds? This isn't a fairy tale, this is the incredible story of an unlikely bond that defied expectations. It was a chilly morning on the farm, the kind where the crisp air stings your cheeks and the ground is damp with dew. The woman stepped into the barn, her boots crunching on the gravel as she made her way past hay bales and old farming tools. She was used to the solitude, the peace of the farm, and the routine of tending to her animals. But that morning, something felt different. As she moved to the back of the barn, a faint sound caught her attention, a soft mewing, almost too quiet to hear. She paused, squinting into the dim light. That's when she saw it, a tiny, black kitten huddled against the corner, trembling with fear. The woman's heart softened immediately. She knelt down, offering a gentle hand, and the kitten, with its big, wide eyes, stared back at her, too scared to move. It was small, vulnerable, and all alone. Without hesitation, she scooped the kitten up, feeling its fragile body in her hands. The barn, once a place of solitude, now felt like a new beginning. And so, the kitten's story and her own began. The woman couldn't bear the thought of leaving the tiny kitten alone in the barn. She brought it inside, gently placing it in a soft, makeshift bed in the corner of her kitchen. For the first few days, the kitten was scared, barely eating or moving, just curled up in a tight little ball. She spoke to it softly, reassuring it with her presence, hoping it would learn to trust her. Slowly, the kitten started to relax. It would cautiously explore the room, its small paws patting softly on the wooden floor, eyes wide with curiosity. The woman would sit quietly watching, her heart warming with every new step the kitten took. She named it Midnight because of its glossy black fur that shimmered like the night sky. As the days turned into weeks, Midnight grew more comfortable. It started playing with balls of yarn, pouncing on imaginary prey, and even curling up next to the woman on the couch, purring contentedly. There were moments of pure joy watching Midnight bat at a dangling string, or nuzzle into her lap for warmth. The bond between them grew quickly, almost as if Midnight had always been a part of her life. But even as Midnight blossomed into a happy kitten, the woman couldn't shake the feeling that this little creature was different. There was something about him that made her wonder if he wasn't quite like other cats. As the months passed, Midnight continued to grow, but not at the usual rate for a kitten. The woman first noticed the changes when she realized that Midnight's appetite seemed insatiable. Every time she put food in his bowl, he devoured it in moments, his stomach growling for more. At first, she thought it was just a phase, that he was going through a growth spurt, but as the weeks went on, it became clear that something was different. His body was getting bigger, muscles were forming beneath his glossy black coat, and his once dainty paws were becoming thick and strong. At 5 months old, Midnight was already bigger than most adult cats. The woman laughed nervously, attributing it to some sort of quirky genetic trait, but deep down, she knew this wasn't normal. Midnight's playful antics started to feel a little off. He began knocking things over with his new strength, pouncing on toys with an intensity that startled her. She'd come home to find furniture rearranged, the remains of a shredded couch cushion scattered across the floor. Midnight's energy seemed endless, and with every passing day, his body grew more powerful. The woman couldn't help but marvel at his transformation. But with that marvel came a growing concern. What exactly was happening to her little kitten? 3 years had passed since the woman first discovered Midnight in her barn, and in that time, he had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. He was no longer the small kitten that once fit comfortably in the palm of her hand. He had become a massive, imposing creature. Midnight now weighed over 100 pounds, and every time she looked at him, she was struck by his size. His thick black coat glistened in the sunlight, but his broad, muscular build made him seem more like a wild animal than the playful kitten he once was. The woman had to adjust her entire life around Midnight's growth. She had reinforced the barn with stronger supports, knowing that his weight might be too much for the old wooden beams. His movements were slow, but powerful. Every step seemed to shake the ground beneath him. It wasn't just his size that shocked her. It was his presence. Midnight had gone from being a companion to something much larger, much more intimidating. Neighbors who had known her for years began to notice the change when they visited. What was once a curious cat was now an enormous, almost mythical animal. Some would stare in disbelief, asking if he was truly the same Midnight they remembered. The woman would smile nervously, but inside, She was filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She couldn't deny it anymore. Midnight was no ordinary cat. But what was he now? Was he still her kitten, or something else entirely? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Midnight growled softly. His amber eyes locked on hers. It wasn't until one fateful afternoon that the woman's curiosity and growing concern would lead to the shocking truth. Midnight's sighs had become impossible to ignore, and after months of wondering, she decided it was time to seek answers. She took him to the nearest veterinarian, a small, rural clinic that she trusted. The vet, a kind but no-nonsense man, was startled by the sheer size of Midnight as she brought him into the examination room. The moment Midnight stepped inside, the vet's eyebrows shot up. "This is not a domestic cat, is it?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. The woman laughed nervously, thinking he was just surprised by Midnight's size. But the vet's expression remained serious. He ran several tests, observing Midnight closely, noting his unusual muscle tone and the way his behavior seemed so far removed from that of an ordinary house cat. After a long pause, the vet delivered the earth-shattering news. "This isn't a regular cat," he said slowly. "It's a black panther. It must have been abandoned or escaped when it was very young. This is no kitten." The woman's heart raced as she processed the revelation. Midnight wasn't just a giant domestic cat, he was a wild animal, a panther, living right under her roof. The realization was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. She'd raised a panther, and she hadn't even known it. The news that Midnight was a black panther changed everything. The woman knew that life with him would never be the same. She spent hours researching, learning about the responsibilities of caring for a wild animal. Despite his domesticated mannerisms, Midnight was no longer just a pet, he was a force of nature. Living with a 200-pound panther wasn't easy. Midnight needed more space, more food, and more attention than any domestic cat could require. The barn, once a place for storage, became his domain. With reinforced walls to accommodate his growing size and strength, she had to install larger doors for him to move freely in and out. And feeding him, well, that became a whole new challenge. Midnight's diet now consisted of large portions of meat, much more than she ever anticipated. Yet, despite the overwhelming reality of living with a panther, the bond between them remained. Midnight still sought her out for affection, curling up at her feet, purring softly, as if he were the same kitten she'd found years ago. But every moment spent with him was a reminder of the wildness that still lived inside him. An untamed creature in the form of a loving companion. As the years went by, the woman came to realize that living with Midnight, her giant panther, was both a privilege and a responsibility. She had raised him as a kitten, and though his appearance and behavior had changed drastically, the connection they shared remained deep. But caring for a wild animal, even one as gentle as Midnight, came with its own set of challenges. She had learned to respect the instincts and power of the animal she once thought was just an oversized cat. Midnight had brought a wildness into her life that she couldn't ignore. Every time she looked at him, she was reminded that nature had a way of defying expectations. While Midnight's story had begun in her barn, it had grown into something far beyond what she could have imagined. It was a story of survival, love, and the unpredictable nature of life itself. And as she watched Midnight rest beside her, she knew that this bond, unlike any other, was truly one for the ages. What would you do if you found a giant wild animal in your barn? Would you have the courage to care for it? Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.